Welcome to the Empowered Flow podcast. I'm Tris Alexandra, holistic clinical nutritionist, women's health and menstrual cycle educator, and mama. Join me and experts in nutrition, fitness, mindset, and holistic healing as we explore conversations to open your mind to a different way of thinking on all things women's health, hormones, periods, cyclical living, and fertility. Whether you're seeking knowledge, inspiration, or a supportive community, you've found your tribe. Let's dive in. Hey, it's Tris here, back for another solo episode, and I want to talk to you all about blood sugar balance and its importance in overall hormonal balance, but also its connection to some of the really common symptoms that I see in a lot of my clients. I also want to share some really practical strategies. So not only the things that you might be doing that you don't realize are impacting blood sugar levels, but also some practical strategies on how to eat for blood sugar balance. So I often get women coming into clinic and sometimes they have been diagnosed with something, it may be PCOS or endometriosis, but quite often women are coming to me with quite a number of different symptoms, and they'll say to me, Tris, I think there's something going on with my hormones. And they're not wrong, but within those symptoms, I am seeing lots of commonalities in things. So regardless of sort of what's going on hormonally, they're also experiencing symptoms of things like fatigue or energy slumps, cravings, particularly that, mid-afternoon, they're going, I need to eat something sweet, or I need to eat something sweet after a meal or after dinner. Low mood, low libido, irritability is like a really big one as well. And it's not necessarily just the irritability that might come pre-period, but just on a day-to-day basis, that like irritability or that feeling of like having a short fuse, just that short fuse kind of feeling. And oftentimes when we then delve into some of the things they're doing just around nutrition and lifestyle, and not that these things are wrong, but when I delve into what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, I'm just seeing some blood sugar dysregulation going on that is connected to these symptoms. And I'll give you the connection between blood sugar balance and hormones as well. But I just wanted to just kind of share with you just the fact that blood sugar balance is a root cause of hormone symptoms, and it is one of the nutrition foundations that you will hear me harp on about, is one of the most important steps that I go through with all of my clients, because it does have such widespread effects on both hormones and on symptoms. Now, many of you would have heard of blood sugar balance before, but for anyone going, but what exactly is blood sugar? What exactly is blood sugar balance? So just a really sort of not too sciencey, very basic lesson. Your blood sugar levels is the level of sugar or glucose in the bloodstream at any given time. And when you eat a meal or anything containing carbohydrates, those carbohydrates are broken down into, some of them are broken down into glucose, and that glucose ends up in the bloodstream, and that raises blood sugar levels. When that happens, the pancreas then secretes insulin, and insulin drives that blood sugar from the bloodstream into cells in order to create ATP or energy. So we want this process to happen. Insulin's definitely not a bad hormone. Blood sugar's not a bad thing either. We actually need our blood sugar levels to be kept within a range. But what can happen is, depending on the way we eat and depending on some other factors that influence this, we can get blood sugar fluctuations that are sitting outside of this normal range that the body then has to work really hard at aiming to bring back into homeostasis, into that normal range. So when we get high blood sugar levels, the body has to pump out more and more insulin. So we're getting big spikes of insulin to normalize that blood sugar. And then on the opposite side, when we're getting really low blood sugar levels, the body needs to release cortisol, our stress hormone, to mobilize glucose from the liver and from muscle cells into the blood to bring blood sugar levels back up to a normal, safe range. And that is basically to keep us alive. So I just wanted to give you that kind of understanding about what blood sugar is. Now, its connection with insulin resistance at a very sort of simple explanation. When we are having these blood sugar fluctuations and having high blood sugar spikes over time often, and we're having more and more release of insulin happening often, what happens is the body then, the action of insulin the body isn't responding to the action of insulin properly. So your body might release some insulin, but that insulin isn't essentially unlocking the doors to allow glucose from the bloodstream into cells. So it's just not working effectively, and that's when we get we can start to get insulin resistance. So essentially what we're eating is impacting our blood sugar levels, and that is impacting two major hormones, insulin and cortisol, which then have a downstream effect on other hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So that's the connection between blood sugar and our hormones, or what we consider like our hormone symptoms, issues, concerns that have to do with like our menstrual cycles. Cortisol, for example, so cortisol, our stress hormone, the precursor to cortisol is progesterone. So cortisol is made from progesterone, and progesterone is such an important hormone that the body makes only after ovulation. And it has really good benefits it's got anti-inflammatory benefits, it has mood stabilizing benefits, it's our progestation hormone, so it maintains pregnancy in the first trimester, and it also keeps estrogen in balance. We need estrogen and progesterone to be in a balance, because if we do have low progesterone, we start to see symptoms of estrogen dominance. Now, on the other hand, we also have insulin, and insulin can impact ovulation from actually happening. And I see this often in women with PCOS. So high levels of insulin will not only increase androgen production, which causes the symptoms of PCOS, but it can block ovulation and interfere with ovulation. And so if we're not having ovulation happening, again, we're not producing progesterone, and we're starting to see menstrual cycle irregularities. There are a number of things that I see women doing often that they don't realize are impacting blood sugar balance. And these are definitely mistakes that I made years ago before I was a nutritionist, and before I realized the importance of those nutrition foundations like blood sugar balance that I always harp on about. But I know for myself, like I thought I was eating really healthy, but I wasn't eating in a way that supported my blood sugar balance. I was under eating. I was not eating enough protein. I was exercising on an empty stomach. I was having coffee first thing in the morning before I ate. I was fasting all through the morning. There was so many things that I was doing that was impacting my blood sugar balance. And these are the same kind of things that I see women doing often. And I think the biggest one and the biggest challenge for most women is breakfast. So what I often see is women either having coffee for breakfast and then not eating till later in the morning. And that might be because they are running out the door, getting kids ready for school or for daycare or whatever it may be. And they've only had time, they've spent all this time looking after their kids and getting their kids breakfast, but they've only had time for a coffee for themselves. Often I see that happening with mums because self-care gets put on the back burner and gets put last before everything else. Or it's women that are getting up really early and going to the gym on a coffee without anything to sustain them for that session, and they're not eating breakfast until, might be 2+ hours after they've woken up. Or for some women, it's that they like to start their day with a piece of toast with peanut butter. As delicious as that may be, it doesn't keep our blood sugar levels stable. So these are some of the biggest common things I see, but I would definitely say that breakfast seems to pose the biggest challenge. Each of our meals does impact blood sugar balance. The timing of our meals and how long we fast between, how long our fast is overnight before we break the fast. These are definitely all things that impact blood sugar balance as well. But I would say breakfast is probably the first thing that I look at and the first thing that I would consider making changes to. And that is because when we wake up in the morning, we have fasted overnight, our bodies, our digestive systems empty of food, our blood sugars are generally at their lowest, and we then have cortisol, that stress hormone, which rises naturally in the morning. It needs to rise. It gets us up and going in the morning, so it is an important hormone. But cortisol rises in the morning and blood sugar levels are quite low. So that first meal of the day and the way we break the fast has the biggest impact on our blood sugars, not only for that meal, but for the rest of the day. So that means what you're eating for breakfast is impacting your energy, your mood, your focus and productivity, your hormonal balance for the long term, but even, just thinking short term here, cravings, your hunger and satiety for the rest of the day. And that is why breakfast is really, really important. Now, something else that might shock you in relation to breakfast is I often see women saying, but I include protein in my breakfast. I have protein. I have an egg on toast. An egg only contains 6 to 7 grams of protein. And so whilst, yes, that is great. And yes, I definitely commend you for having some protein in your breakfast, whether it's 1 or 2 eggs, that's awesome. And that's a really, really great start. But it's not the amount of protein that we need first thing in the morning to keep blood sugar levels stable. So whilst a couple of eggs is great with breakfast, we're really aiming for at least 25 to 30 grams of protein. And this is again where the challenge comes in, because if we look at traditional, quote unquote, traditional breakfast foods, they are typically low in protein. Yes, you might have eggs, but typically not in the amount that we need. And then if we look at other breakfast foods that we're typically eating, they're low in protein. We're looking at, our breads and cereals. Even if we're having some granola with a little bit of yogurt, it may not be enough to, have 25 to 30 grams of protein. Now, when I do work with my clients and we do make this change particularly around breakfast, but just around eating for blood sugar balance in general, some of the, and when we optimize their breakfast and make sure they're getting enough protein for breakfast, some of the changes that I see that happen quite quickly is improved energy. So improved energy throughout the day, but not getting those like mid-afternoon energy slumps, reduction of cravings and even binge eating because we're satiating ourselves and we're keeping blood sugar levels stable and not having that blood sugar roller coaster. It's supportive for fat loss. So if you are trying to lose weight, blood sugar balance needs to be part of that strategy for fat loss. It eliminates hangry-ness, and I think we can probably all agree that we've been there before. When we're so hungry, we are irritable and angry. I know the feeling of hangry-ness, and I'm sure many of you do too. I see reduction of PMS symptoms pre-period. So not only that irritability during the day, but even PMS symptoms pre-period. Reduction of PCOS symptoms, and I'll talk about the science behind that. Improve menstrual cycle regularity, improve focus, concentration, and productivity, and reduced insulin resistance and improve blood sugar level markers. Now, I want to talk about the science behind eating a healthy, high-protein breakfast and the benefits of that, because I know for some people as well, they've heard about the benefits of, say, fasting, and that's why they may not be eating breakfast or delaying their first meal until later in the morning. And like I said in the first episode, we need to be conscious as women of looking at these studies and the science behind some of these practices when those studies have not been done in women or menstruating women and have not looked at any of the changes that could happen to hormones and to our menstrual cycle. So when we look at the science behind breakfast, there is a number of studies, and the science is pretty good at showing the importance of breakfast and a high protein breakfast for a number of different reasons. So I'll share with you a couple of studies. I've read many, but I'll share a couple that really stood out to me. I will share the names of these studies for anyone who's interested in the science and wants to go have a look on PubMed at, more detail of these studies. But one of them, for example, there was a 2018 study by Lopez Sobala et al., and it was called The Importance of Breakfast in the Nutritional and Health Improvement of the Population. And in this study, the authors concluded scientific studies suggest that making a healthy breakfast is related to a greater intake of nutrients in the total of the day, better coverage of the nutritional recommendations, and better quality of the whole diet. It is also associated with better body weight control and healthy cardiometabolic risk indicators, both in children and adults. Breakfast has also been related to improvements in attention and cognitive function in all age groups, both in acute, chronic, and intervention studies. Now, another one I found really interesting in relation specifically to the menstrual cycle, and there was a couple of studies on this, but one that I read, it was a 2020 study, Fujiwara et al., called Adolescent Dietary Habit-Induced Obstetric and goodness, I can't even say that word right now, gynecologic disease as a new hypothesis possible involvement of clock systems. So sorry, long title there. But this was looking at females who ate breakfast or skipped breakfast and what that meant in the sense of what they were reporting for menstrual cycle symptoms. And the authors concluded that we found that female college students who skipped breakfast had higher incidences of dysmenorrhea, and that means painful periods, and irregular menstruation, suggesting that meal skipping affects ovarian and uterine functions. So really interesting there. I have also read a number of studies specifically studied in women with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, showing that eating a high protein breakfast reduces insulin, reduces high levels of androgen, and in turn not only improves weight loss, but also improves menstrual cycle regularity and some of the symptoms of PCOS. So all of this information aside, let's talk about practical strategies, because this is when we all come unstuck when it comes to making changes or actually doing the damn thing. We can read all of the information we want about how important something is, but when it comes to actually implementing it, I really believe it is about having the practical strategies. And this is what I help my clients with, is nutting down personalized strategies for a start, but also what is going to work for them and their lifestyle. Because what works for a mother with 2-3 kids, getting them out the door in the morning, compared to what works for another woman who doesn't have kids and, has a completely different morning routine, is going to be different. So I'm talking about really general strategies here. Some of them may work, some of them may not work for you. But in the first, in the first instance is, how do we make a meal that is blood sugar balanced? So whether that be breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whether that be a snack, what actually makes a meal, what actually needs to be in that meal to balance our blood sugar levels. So I would say the first thing here, and the biggest thing that I see women missing out on, is protein. So like I said, we want to be aiming for that 20 to 30 grams of protein to really stabilize blood sugar levels. Protein is also really satiating. So whether you're trying to lose weight, or whether you're trying to reduce cravings, or whether you're just trying to get a grip on that hunger, protein is really satiating. So 25 to 30 grams, you can get that from a range of different sources. It could be eggs, it could be any sort of animal protein like fish, meat, chicken, it could be tempeh or tofu. There is obviously some in Greek yogurt. To get 30 grams, you do need to eat quite a lot. But there is definitely some protein in there. There's a little bit of protein in nuts and seeds. I certainly wouldn't go saying that's a high protein food, because again, you're getting more fats and more of everything else than the actual protein. But what you can look at is combining some of these foods to get up to that sort of 30 grams. So you may not want to have 5 eggs for breakfast, but you might combine a couple of eggs with a quality sausage from the butcher, or some nitrate-free bacon, or some other kind of animal protein, or something like that. So again, this is where I really personalize things with my clients to help them work out what is actually going to work for them in a way that not only suits their lifestyle, but suits their food preferences. Now, the next thing after protein I'd look at in your meals is fiber. Now, fiber slows the digestion of food. As a side note, it's also good for gut health, but it is helpful for stabilizing blood sugar levels as well. It does fill you up volume-wise in your stomach, so it can help with that feeling of fullness. And fiber we're going to get mostly from vegetables, from fruits. We will get some from grains as well. Often these fiber sources are a source of carbohydrates as well. It just varies in how much carbs are in those. So the amount of carbohydrates you get from a grain or a piece of fruit will be different to the amount that you get from most of our non-starchy veggies, which are much lower in carbohydrates. So that then obviously brings me to carbs, which is the next macronutrient as part of a balanced meal. Now, there is nothing bad about carbs. The amount of carbs that each of us needs is going to vary probably the most out of all macronutrients, and that's because we have different levels of physical activity. We are at different life stages, so someone who's pregnant or breastfeeding will need a lot more than someone who's sedentary, for example. If you have any level of insulin resistance, the amount of carbohydrates you have might change. It doesn't mean you need to go low carb. It doesn't mean you need to be eating keto to balance your blood sugars at all. It's just really looking at the amount of carbohydrates in relation to protein, fiber, and fats in your meal. Then fats is the last macronutrient. So as a very, very general guide, looking at, a tablespoon or two or a thumbful or two of fats in each of those meals. Again, fats will slow the digestion of foods. Fats are also, as a side note, so important for the absorption of vitamins A, D, E, and K. And so some of this low-fat diet era that we've seen has impacted the absorption of those nutrients and impacted that kind of nutrient status. But I'm going off on a tangent here. So looking at your overall composition of your meal, protein, carbs, fats, and fibers in the right ratio are going to help to stabilize blood sugar levels. And ladies, honestly, look at protein, because most women I see are not eating enough protein. So the other big one I want you to think about to balance your blood sugars, and this is going to be potentially triggering for some people, but is to consider heavily not having coffee first thing in the morning, not having coffee before food, or having it as a breakfast replacement. I spoke about when we first wake up in the mornings, cortisol, our stress hormone, naturally rises. And when we add a stimulant on top of that and add coffee on top of that without any food, we are rising that cortisol even further. And like I said, women are sensitive to the amount of cortisol because cortisol takes progesterone. Progesterone is a precursor to cortisol. So we're really wanting to lower that cortisol, lower that stress load on the body. It has impacts on something called the HPA axis, so the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, HPAO, ovarian axis, which is really that signaling and that communication pathway between the brain, the adrenals, and the ovaries that regulates our menstrual cycle. When it comes to practically implementing all of this, so maybe you're sitting back listening to this and thinking, maybe I need to look at adding more protein to my breakfast, or maybe I need to start eating breakfast, or look at the macronutrient composition across my day. Maybe I need to look at where I'm having my coffee in the morning. I want you just to pick one thing to start with and make one change, rather than, because what we often do and what I see often is we decide we're going to make a change, we decide we want to improve our health, reduce symptoms, and we try and do 201 things at a time, and it leads to overwhelm. So instead, what happens is when we pick one thing, or maybe two, whatever you feel that is practical and realistic and achievable for you, like, yes, give yourself a little bit of a push, but set yourself something realistic. When we do that and we achieve what we said we're going to achieve, it builds trust within ourselves. It builds self-trust. It builds self-confidence. We're basically telling ourselves, yes, I can do this. And from there, once you've implemented that and once it feels really easy and it feels flowy, then you can add something else in and layer in on top of that. Because if we try and do everything at once, it leads to overwhelm for all of us. And when we get overwhelmed, we stop trusting ourselves, stop trusting that we are able to follow through with something. We feel like we've failed, and we feel like we're not able to follow through with something that we wanted to achieve. So that would be, I don't know why I ended up down this path, but I really wanted to share that with you because I wanted to make it practical and achievable for you guys to do. And if all that feels like a lot and it's either information overload, or you're not sure where to start, or you're actually just wanting someone to give you a little bit more accountability and support and just, have that kind of like step-by-step pathway to get to where you're wanting to resolve symptoms and to feel really good, then I would definitely encourage you to check out my Hormone Reset program. So this is coming up starting on Friday, the 16th of February. And the Hormone Reset is a 21-day program. It is designed to help you balance your blood sugars and hormones, to kick cravings, improve your energy, support fat loss, and put you on the path to optimal hormonal balance and health. So I will be guiding you and helping you through this 21 days. We will be having weekly live educational calls or workshops, and they will also be recorded if you can't make it live. What I think the biggest thing that people are loving out of this program is the meal plans. So it just means that you don't have to think about what to cook. You can just start putting it into action. Meal plans are all done for you. There's a variety of foods. They're all based around whole foods. They're delicious. There's dietary adjustments if you're needing dairy-free. Most of them are gluten-free. But then you also get to keep them. So obviously you've got a variety of recipes that you can then add to your own meal planning later on. And what else about the meal plans? They definitely don't require a lot of time in the kitchen. I'm really big on, I love creating plans that mean that you can cook once and eat multiple times. So we're saving time in the kitchen. Now, as part of the program, you'll also be learning my frameworks for building balanced meals, particularly focused on breakfast, and my meal planning and prepping how-tos and strategies so that you can take this away and make it a lot easier for you. So reach out to me on Instagram at Tris Alexandra Nutrition if you've got any questions, if you're wanting to chat, and I will share in the show notes the link to the Hormone Reset starting the 16th of February if you're interested as well. All right, ladies, that's all for today. I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining us on the Empowered Flow podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I'd love you to share it with a friend and take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support means the world and fuels our mission to empower women everywhere. You can also reach out to me on Instagram at Tris Alexandra Nutrition. Sending big love. I'll catch you in the next episode.